Well, I wanted to ask you this question. Tell me what you think. So when we were doing Disney Infinity,
Hmm.
we tried not to talk about necessarily speaking to girls or to boys. We spoke more about to families, and in so doing, we would talk about different styles of gameplay that may have a broader appeal. So we tried to move a little bit away from, oh, we're targeting girls. Instead, would say, well, we're going to have some nurturing gameplay, and we're going to have some,
Yeah.
growth gameplay, and we're going to have some combat. We're going to have different things because it'll appeal to different elements of the family. Is there a solution there that instead of saying we're targeting this at men or at women, we start saying, well, we're targeting a certain type or a genre of gameplay style that may have appeal to men or to women, but we're not really. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, oh, I totally get. There's a two-pronged challenge here. First of all, as background, my favorite thing to do in vanilla Disney Infinity was ride the pig mascot in
Yes.
the Monsters U
Yep. Yeah.
playset. I really enjoyed that. But then what did I find myself gravitating towards? Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And it is difficult because yes, play style absolutely matters. But then you have to somehow signal to the audience you're marketing to that this product is for them. And if there's no girl on the box, girls don't necessarily think this is for them because they're the generation of princess marketing, right? Kids are very media savvy. And I see this in the kids that I sort of use as my informal focus group. These are girls that love superheroes and they have no problem playing with boys' toys. But they're not going to waste their time on something that they think doesn't want them. And so I think you're absolutely on the right track from a game design perspective. I think that you also have to consider what the format is too. I mean, I tried sort of the toy box and you have those builders, but then you have the people that just want to play through the games as well, right? You were casting a big net on that franchise. And then there were the people like me who wanted to collect like all the little tools, and I like the little Fisher Price style people, so I could just load them around and watch them, in the toy box.
Oh, the toy box. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that is a female way to play a game, collection. But then I wanted to go in and blast the crap out of, enemies as Davy Jones. So that freedom really appealed to me. And you guys went for that short experience, so you didn't get into the turn the TV off 5 more minutes. I really like that about that. You got these short, meaningful experiences in Infinity. But see, you can design the most fantastic game for girls out there. And if they're not effectively marketed to, they're not going to sample. And sampling, I think, is a far bigger problem in gaming right now than the quality of the product. I will advocate for the quality of the product until the cows come home. But the marketing isn't serving it. I mean, what did Disney Infinity have to do? Frozen.
Yeah.
Oh, all of a sudden, I didn't even really dig the Frozen content, but that was, one of the big complaints was that there were no female figures in the launch. And that, I understand that was a conscious choice, but then they started, then the Frozen figures came out, then Merida came out, then
we had a lot of female characters. The thing is and as long as we're talking Infinity, we also watched our numbers a lot, right? What is selling, what is not selling? We'll do more of what sells and then try and bring up the others.
Yeah.
And so there were lots of discussions behind the scenes about we want to reach the family, and you'll see our later play sets that there was always a female character included, along with so that you could brother and sister could play together, mom and son or whatever, so that they felt like they were included. And that was partly in reaction to what we saw out of the first Disney Infinity, but it was that we want to include. And this is, we talked already about agenda. That's my agenda, and why I've been responding to Anita Sarkeesian is instead of excluding people, I'm in the camp of everybody's welcome, everybody come in, everybody find your place, let's grow, let's grow, let's grow. You know, it's a big tent, everybody in. But anyway, so
Yeah, which I think we're in the exact same place there.
yeah.
And I mean, one of the things I loved about Infinity, we were talking about this before we got started, was your inclusive color scheme instead of your gender neutral color scheme. You know, there are pink skies in Pirates of the Caribbean. There are sort of those darker worlds in the Star Wars playsets. The you can run around as Ashoka Tano or as I forget the Leia. Leia was the other toy before Rey. But you could run around, and those were Endor was very red and green. I forget the, but I'm like, you didn't girly it up. But then the Ewoks were adorable. You could pick them up and whip them at things. You know, it was. I love chuck the Ewok. That I love doing that. But those weren't girl levels, and there aren't boy levels. Right? There is you used every color in the paint box in every level. Agrabah had the yellows, but then the teals and the pinks as well. Those are girl colors. But no, they're Disney colors. You guys had this really inclusive palette, which is shared by World of Warcraft. And these are the colors that are actually inherently psychologically pleasing to people because it's in a sunset. You know, these nature cues are very important when you're setting your palettes. And it drives me crazy when I start hearing people give talks where it's like, make sure you have a gender neutral color scheme. Well, if that attracted women, Angry Birds would have flopped, you know?
Yeah.
Who are the female Angry Birds? The pink one, the purple one, and the white one.
Yeah.
And instead of declaring a war on pink, and I'm somebody who doesn't like playing the pink character unless it's Kirby, and then, you know, Kirby's my blob. I'm not sure Kirby has a gender, but, you know, I don't want to play the pink character because that's not my play style. I want to play the monster. But I'm not going to reject a game just because there's a pink background. Like, come on. And let's face it, I'm not typical in that regard. Most girls gravitate towards that pink section in the toy store because that is the symbol of this is for you. This is the stuff that is relevant to your interests. So it's almost like, you know, the Disney Infinity box would have had to have been like right down the middle where you have like the black on the one side and the Star Wars and the pink on the other side for like the princesses or something like that. Or market two completely different boxes for the exact same damn thing. Where one's marketed to girls, one's marketed to boys. It's the same damn ass product, but...
You know, we talked about stuff like that. We really did. There was times when we were talking about, we'll have two versions and it'll be identical in the box, but it'll appeal to different demographics.
Because it's shorthand, right?
Yeah,
I mean, the color of the box is not the same argument as what are these characters doing. Like, Frozen was a wake-up call for a lot of people, I think, because first of all, you had two girls, so they didn't all have to be one thing. But it was also, one of them was actually dangerous. Like, she actually hurt people. You know, Elsa. I keep wanting to call her Elphaba because it's...
No, she's not wicked.
She's not wicked, but close. But she actually hurt people. And there was that sort of... And what a coming-of-age self-esteem. That song just kicks women in the feels, and parents are sick of it, but at the same time, it's like, it's all true. Let it go is all true. You know? But there was a nice little... But boys loved Frozen too. And you don't, it's funny because you don't see the parents of boys arguing, I don't like all the black in the Star Wars marketing. I think this is far too sinister. All the focus on Kylo Ren and Darth Vader, it's all too violent. You don't hear that. You hear the parents of girls go, I don't like all this pink. I don't like the message it's sending. And this is this othering thing again. We have devalued the feminine. So instead of it being that net, instead of it all coming from the center and occupying different places in space, which is equal, we've created this hierarchy where boy is more legitimate and more serious than girl. And if we can reclaim the seriousness of feminine subject matter, we can stop fighting about pink and actually starting at looking, you know, what that pink bow is representing, because Ms. Pac-Man was a superior game to Pac-Man. Just saying.
It was, yeah. There's more. It was an evolution. Yeah.
Well, it's crazy because that that bow that's a feminine gender signifier. Well, they put lipstick and eyelashes and a bow on her because they could. They had that graphics capability now, and it was, look, we have more detail. But no, Pac-Man is the norm. Ms. Pac-Man is the aberration from the norm. If we are actually going to go down the rabbit hole of a culture of the Pac-Men, perhaps we can argue that, but because there is only one Pac-Man and only one Miss Pac-Man, we really can't say that. We need more Pac-Men and see how they are represented. Perhaps Pac-Man is just naked. And perhaps he just got out of the shower and had to fight ghosts,
What was interesting to me about Ms. Pac-Man is that it was Ms., right?
Yeah.
It was MS. It wasn't Miss. It wasn't Mrs. Yeah, it was deliberate. It was making a broad appeal in a way.
But isn't that telling that something that was actively catering to second wave feminism, because that's what it was. Ms.
Yes,
Magazine was a big deal at the time, and because Pac-Man was a franchise marketed at women, they wanted to appeal to that sensibility. And isn't it funny how much cultural norms have changed, in that back then it was, oh, Ms., that would have been considered like social justice warrior territory right now, and now Ms. Pac-Man is some kind of symbol of patriarchal oppression. It's just lacking all context of the time. And
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I totally agree that, yeah, at the time it was progressive, and now it's seen as regressive.
It was progressive to the point that people were somewhat uncomfortable with.
Right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
It was Ms. Because I remember because the whole thing about Ms., it was the pronoun war of its day.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
It was, I want something that indicates the honorific, the title that isn't based on my marital status. And the whole idea is a man was a Mr. whether he was married or unmarried. Women had a status. You were Miss if you weren't married. You were a Mrs. if you were.
Right.
And women were saying, no, for the purposes of business, it doesn't matter what my marital status is. And people fought about that the way they're fighting against he, she, they, zir, z, this gender performance pronoun war right now. And I think that's a big part of the reason I'm having trouble taking the freaking out seriously.
Since we've talked about Infinity, it's interesting. Infinity was a success. It did what it set out to do. It became the dominant Toys to Life in the area. We hit all the markets we wanted to. We designed and built those toys. We built a whole toy line that Disney doesn't normally do. And then they canceled it. And the cancellation is really interesting. It wasn't because Disney Infinity was failing.
No.
It was because the ROI, the risk on that, Disney started to feel was too high. That they were looking at the numbers and they were saying, all this money we're investing in Disney Infinity is bringing us a return, but we're not sure that's sustainable. We're not sure that we're going to be able to continue to make that. It's risky. We can put that money somewhere else.
Well, wasn't it also that they moved strictly to a licensed partners? Like the whole business model changed. They're not doing anything in-house anymore. Yeah,
very, very little in-house. I think they're still doing some mobile stuff. But yeah, you're absolutely right that was a big part of that. They looked at, was it Battlefront? They licensed. And they said, look how much money we make from that thing at very, very low risk. Now look at Disney Infinity, which is costing us millions and millions of dollars and high risk. Why don't we take that money, put it in some other department, and just license our products, even though Infinity's doing fine,
Isn't that connected to the idea that Disney's self-identity is that we are a film and TV and theme park company? This is what we do well. We're going to license out our characters to people who do things other than our core. Like, I understand that this is... Now, okay, I know this, but how many people in the games press reported that Disney Infinity either failed or was not a commercial success?
Right, and that was, we saw a lot of that. You hit on, Yeah, many people were pretty complimentary about what we had done with Infinity, but you hit on exactly what Disney does with its business model, which is they generate IP and then they tend to license it out. Disney Infinity was unique because we were making those toys in-house. And Disney usually doesn't do that, right? They usually license that and they have somebody else make the toys, Mattel or whomever, and then
And
they take all the risk, right?
according to Bill Roper, those were some difficult meetings
Oh, it was
sometimes.
killer, killer.
Yeah,
I'm pretty good
actually,
friends with Bill, and what a great guy. I've
that
really
guy
enjoyed working.
deserves a Purple Heart for
Yeah.
some of the higher up Disney meetings he sounded like he was in. And everybody cares a lot. And sometimes that can lead to some frustrating things because you guys have your vision and that may or may not gel with what the Pixar slash Disney higher ups have in mind. Like there was some really interesting behind the scenes philosophy stuff that hearing about it, I'm like, wow, there's fights, but both sides are fighting the good fight in their own way. I think that's lost from it not being in-house.
Yes, yeah,
Battlefront wasn't the best game, and I really wanted to like it. Whereas Disney Infinity, it was what it was. It was very focused. It was very targeted, but it did what it did exceptionally well. And it had such a dedicated vision. Like, this is for kids who are too old for Skylanders, who we're not going to tell how to play this game.
yeah.
Beautiful, right?
Very family, very creative. We wanted to bring that in. But the best thing, and as long as I'm going to be emotional here, but those of us who worked on Disney Infinity, when we started to get in the fan letters from kids who were underprivileged in a bad situation, we got stories from mothers who said, Disney Infinity helped hold us together in a difficult time because I could do that with my kids, or kids who were in the hospital. And then you started to go, hey, this is why we make games. All this money, all this stuff that we're talking about on the business side, really, it comes right back down to those individuals, those kids who are playing, the families who are playing together. And that's when they closed out Infinity, that's what we grieved the most, was that we were letting down our fans who had felt like we had worked very hard to work with them and grow something with them, and then to say, as a business decision, they're backing away from Infinity. Guys who lost their jobs, we felt bad, but I think we felt worse for the fans. We really did. We said, it's so sad that these kids who love playing our game aren't going to see anything in the future.
That actually is taking the whole exchange, the whole communication you have with your fan base out of social norms. You helped me.
Yeah.
You've given back into the realm of business norms. And yeah, that's every persuasion, behavioral, and economics book in the world indicates that that's a groin pull. I mean, you've touched on something here that I hear from a lot of people, that gaming saved me. I think we all have that game that we remember as sort of being a lifeline because it is associated with the teenage years, and you game more when you're unemployed, and you're gaming more when you don't want to face the world. But when I did the article on PTSD and gaming, 24 gamers shared their stories, like really emotional stuff. They shared their suicide attempts and their challenges with mental health and the difficulties they had reintegrating when they got out of the military, and they used these combat games just for the sights and sounds, right? It's like, I have a friend who's ex-military, and he's like, back in the military when the world was normal, these stories, these interactive experiences do befriend the friendless. They give a form
They give you a home.
They give you a home, but they also give you a form of communication beyond words from a developer perspective. What do you want to see the games press do better other than the stuff we've talked about? How can we share our mutual love of gaming in different roles? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I'll speak kind of from just my personal sense of it as a developer. The the press that I respect the most and I see the most valuable are those who just honestly report on their experiences of playing the games as gamers. That they avoid getting trapped into various ideological stances or anything else. They approach the game as a gamer. This is why the problem with Sarkeesian that I had was that she was neither a gamer nor was she well informed on feminism, and yet she was talking about that. And then I see what you've done where you are a gamer, and it's very apparent that you've played a ton of games. And so when you have a review of a game or insight into a game, it comes with that understanding, that knowledge. You're one of us. And so that makes me feel like it's, there's value that we all share this gamer sensibility together, from press to developer to player. We're all kind of in that same, if that makes any sense. I hate the notion that press stands outside, that press isn't.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay, it's in-group versus out-group. It's are versus you are. Because this is something I've been struggling to understand. I hear this all the time, that you're a gamer and Anita Sarkeesian's not. I assume she plays video games. She seems to care very deeply about Princess Peach. And I understand identity is something of an intangible. But people say this a lot. You obviously have played these games. And there's no evidence that she hasn't.
But actually, there is some evidence that she hasn't.
Okay. What am I missing here?
Well, she's been called out several times for using video that was stolen from Let's Play videos and not attributed. That she was going out and saying, "Here, let me show you this element in the game," and then somebody else will say, "Hey, that's my Let's Play. You didn't play that. I played that." And so people started to make this case of, "Are you really even playing this, or are you just a talking head?" And the thing is, maybe she does, but she won't talk to anybody about it. She won't come forward and say, "Oh, I played that, and here was my experience." She says she does. But with that closed wall, that like, I refuse to talk to you about this, I refuse to go into any depth, that people start to get suspicious. And I'm one of those who I think, I kind of doubt that she's played, I suspect I've shipped more titles than she's played through. And that's just my suspicion.
Played through, maybe that's the difference. I cannot, just because I want to believe in a just world, that she hasn't touched these games at all. I remember it was the Dishonored clip where it's in I forget, some cat metaphor was the name of the brothel. And I love brothels in games. I love them. And it's because it's frilly and it's feminine. And you can imagine, the air smells like perfume and powder. And it's a very feminine space. And because most of the time it's like, okay, this would smell of like, burning tires and rust. So it's nice to step into those areas that seem more frilly. But it was the mechanic of zooming in with Corvo's mask onto a prostitute's butt. The game never does that for you. That was a player choosing to do that.
Right. So back to Anita, you were saying.
Yeah, I think that she doesn't have that context. I think that perhaps either she's playing the games, but she's playing the games because this is something that's going to be work.
Right. Used for an ideological purpose to demonstrate a problem, right? Like she said, it was the Batman, the butts, right? I couldn't ever get the butt to show. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? First of all, it's quite easy. And secondly, that's why you're playing that game?
And I mean, I'm sitting there looking at it, man, if the cape was flying all over the place, you wouldn't be able to see anything.
Right.
See, those are the sorts of things that, there's that quote she's so derided for, that everything is racist, everything is sexist, and you feel like you have to point that out.
Right.
And I feel a little bit bad for her on that one, because that was taken somewhat out of context. It doesn't make the criticisms of that quote any less valid. She was just saying that this is what everyone goes through when you go in the, Reaper-style indoctrination that is a gender studies education. Right. I can spot a second-year women's studies student a mile away. That is at the point where everything is racist, everything is sexist. You have to call all of that out. And that's why I have a structural issue with the way any of these interdisciplinary things are taught. Is you need to ease people into that, but what they're doing is instead they're breaking people so that they can reform these broken souls who feel like the world has now betrayed them into good little reaper husks that are going to go out and perpetuate this message.
Right, I agree that it's an indoctrination.
It's not encouraging free thought.
Right.
And I had that shaken out of me by working in television, because instead of just going, well, de Beauvoir says, or Firestone says, or Millett says, or all this stuff, instead of just citation, 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 I actually had to make my own stuff. And I had to be, okay, how do I apply performative gender theory? How do I recognize male gaze for what it is? My audience is male. There's no denying that. It's late night at on Fridays. It's a male audience and they're all drunk. So how do I take an informed perspective? I think that process of actually having to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, it's radically different from just sitting back and going, my professor said this is bad.
Yes, yeah. And you brought up that quote of Anita's that I've used in my videos, and then I've taken criticism saying you've taken it out of context. My response is I don't think she matured beyond that. When you look at the context in its context, you look at the comment in its context, she just says I was really obnoxious, and I had to learn how not to be so obnoxious. And my thought is, have you changed your opinion on this? Or do you still second year gender studies? The whole world is full of sexism, because that's what it looks like to me, that you still believe this. And if not, let us know.
Because the entire paradigm is tropes versus women. We're only going to show the bad. And she is trying to evolve. She's doing that Women in History series, but that
to her credit,
it's apples and oranges though.
Yeah.
It's not. She tried that positives in gaming thing, and that was where that thing I said about the de Beauvoir quote came in, was that, okay, the Scythian, this is a great example of womanhood. We don't even know.
And you can tell she's a woman. Yeah.
She looks more like an ostrich to
exactly.
me. And then there's like Beyond Good and Evil, and I mean, let's face it, that protagonist, what was her name? Jade, I think, looked vaguely boyish.
Yeah, she's a boy. She's a basically, yeah.
Yeah, and so so good female characters look like boys. How is that not patriarchy?
Exactly.
How is that not saying male norm, female aberration? How is that not saying that male qualities are more valued by society than women? Women are more than the feminine pronoun. And that's where gender performance theory kicks in. What does it matter if a character is female if the female gender is not relevant to the experience? I'd much rather it be Undertale, where it's just the human. Because maybe I'm wrong, but I would think if somebody is normally supportive and then they say, this thing I didn't like so much, I still love your stuff, but this I didn't like, I'd imagine that feels like actual constructive criticism as opposed to just an attempt to tear it all down. Am I wrong in that assumption?
No, I think you're right that you could go and break things out. I don't know if the Academy does it right for the Oscars and that sort of stuff, but breaking things out into best voice acting or that sort of stuff might be really worthwhile. Give people their kudos for exploring, trying new things, or doing an achievement that's not necessarily just best genre of this game, best RTS or best RPG, right?
That doesn't, the siphoning into, I mean, this is again game tools.
Yeah.
We call these genres.
Yes.
A genre, I think you know where I'm going with this. A genre is mystery, comedy, sci-fi.
Right.
That is literary genre, right? Game type, game class is a different descriptor. So when you have something like Mass Effect, the genre is science fiction.
Right.
The type of game, and we need a word for this, right? Because when we're sorting games, what does it get put into? RPG.
Right.
But Mass Effect, The Witcher, and Dragon Age are very different RPGs. Horizon Zero Dawn is an action RPG. The The Witcher is an action RPG, they're not even close to the same game. Because the literary genre is different. You know, their use of romanticism, their use of mystery, their storytelling device. And because we've made genre jump to game type, you know, gameplay experience, as opposed to narrative descriptor, how do we describe what the game's about then in a shorthand? You know, like that's why these titles get so long. And this is what I'm talking about tools again, because we do need a name for class of game. If we just call it game class, fine. But we need to leave genre where it is. Because
that's a really insightful point, because you know, I'm very guilty of that. I change. When I talk about games, I tend to talk about their type as though it were the genre, like I just did.
But that's what we do. And then there's aesthetic on top of genre, right? I got this from steampunk is an aesthetic. Even feminism is actually an aesthetic adjective. It is not a genre. You can have a feminist mystery. You can have a feminist comedy. You can have feminist science fiction. But you can have sci-fi without the feminism, but feminist what? Right? You can't just have feminist. There's got to be something. And so when somebody starts going, is it feminist? I'm like, feminist what? Feminist mystery, feminist comedy, feminist science. This informs. And so it's like steampunk. Well, steampunk is not a type of story. Steampunk is an art style the same way Gothic or Romantic are. And there are certain games that actually cross the literary tradition streams. The Witcher is an example of a game that combines romanticism and rationalism in a way that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. A lot of RPGs have very humanistic societies clashing with theocracies. And we're so sloppy with our terms in gaming that me, being someone who does engage in hopefully fact-based analysis, it becomes very difficult. Because, okay, we say genre. What does that mean? What does that word mean? You know?
Right.
And then it's listed like genre, shooter.
Right.
That tells me squat about whether I'm going to like this world. Right? I mean, I love Doom. I love it. But I also love Far Cry Primal, which is first person, but not really a shooter. That's more of a melee game. And a lot of people went into Primal expecting the primary shooter mechanic they got in Far Cry, and it isn't that at all. It's all things you can throw, because it's the Stone Age, right? And people seem to either like or dislike those games based on stuff that I end up thinking, if you didn't like that element, why did you buy the game? Because they didn't know, because we don't have a vocabulary. You know, when we start analyzing systems, we start using sociological approaches that are about actual people that we'd never touch in a literature course. You'd never touch in a film studies course. No, that's humanities, leave it out. But we don't have the tools to analyze interactive entertainment. I mean, we have things like ludonarrative dissonance. We have the idea of immersion. We have the idea of translation of intent. We have those tools on the ludic side. We're not as good on the narrative part of that ludonarrative equation. We're still borrowing terms, right?
Right.
And I think that is causing a huge amount of this cluster you-know-what that's going on right now, is expectations. These people, again, who used to be pop culture pundits, who, you know, oh, Joss Whedon, and she kind of got a name for daring to take on the great Joss Whedon. And then Anita comes into games and uses the same tools, which may work well enough on a linear television show, but, you know, simple things like in the game between Mario and Bowser, Peach is the ball.
Right.
anybody with and I touched on this in my series. No, they're all balls. It's billiards. One is knocking into another to score, like, but that is the difference between looking at something like a piece of linear entertainment where you examine those power structures, and a game which is, you could claim the white ball is the most important ball in billiards because that's the one you make direct contact with. You could claim the black ball is the most important game because that's the one you have to sink last. But can you really say with certainty? You need both.
Right. Yeah. It's they're all part of the same game experience, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a purpose of analysis. Like, she's looking at Mario, like, this is a story about a guy who saves the princess from a dragon dude that happens to be a ginger, maligned again, oh Bowser. But, from a game perspective, this is a game about a player navigating a plumber through a series of mazes to get to the princess at the end.
Right.
It's a different framework.
Yeah, to me, and especially since we're using Mario, a lot of that is shorthand to get the player engaged in doing something. It's not about that storyline specifically. And you actually see that in other Donkey Kong games, right? Because Donkey Kong Jr., what's going on there? Now you're the monkey and you're going to rescue Donkey Kong himself. But it's the same kind of style of game, right?
And even in Mario 2, which, okay, fair enough, did not begin life as Mario 2, but see, this is the problem. These critics use death of the author when it's convenient. They take it away when it's not convenient. They use exegesis, for lack of a better term, when it's convenient. So who cares if it was Doki Doki Panic in Japan? What was it in the West? And in that, Peach was a playable character. And she wasn't even the mama character. Luigi actually took that spot. And so Peach, I remember that. She could fly over the, talk about player agency. She could freaking fly because of her dress, right? So gamers are, they have that. And so they start hearing, oh, the pink dress is femininity and it's a gender signifier and everything like that. And does this mean that a leaf symbolizes a raccoon? Because that happens in Mario 2, right? It's there's this animism mixed with Mario almost bridges the gap between Western animism in Fairy Tale and Japanese animism in their version of storytelling. And it's so delightfully random because of that. So it's in this framework with this guy saving a princess, but he's not a knight, he's a plumber. Like like, princess of what? Do you notice there's no queen of the Mushroom Kingdom? There's no king of the Mushroom Kingdom. Peach is the only ruler we ever see. So does that mean princess means something else in this world? We really don't know, right? And then the poor Toads, they just seem so, and there's an interesting one because Nintendo has said Toads actually don't have a gender.
Right. But then you have some that are pink and, right?
Because they adopt personas.
Yes. Yeah.
And so then that ends up as a very derivative thing. But part of the issue is that someone like Anita Sarkeesian, and I hate throwing shade on her, but this is the problem. Men get picked on in gaming because men are not othered. Anita Sarkeesian gets picked on in gaming because she is the self and everybody else is othered in terms of feminist game criticism. It's lonely at the top, right? So Anita Sarkeesian herself, ironically, has become a trope, right? That everybody else is judged against. And so it's like tropes versus Anita now. But she has not, because she hasn't done something that is proactive instead of reactively critical, that it hasn't been analytical, she has never actually had to go through the process of cutting those corners and making those tough decisions and being constrained by budgets and time and technical capabilities. And when you've done that, you do get a different perspective. And I'm sure there's choices that you had to make as a game director that if you just had an extra month, you would have made a completely different choice.
Oh yeah, that we make so many choices based on our resources available to us and the time frame we're working against that it really drives game development, especially when you're on a AAA title that has to release on a certain schedule. You
And
know,
you
you
have
don't.
to and you have to convince a marketing department that what you're doing is going to sell. I think that's an element a lot of people don't understand as well. You guys don't have, this is what I'm doing, go sell marketing. They kind of
Right.
tell you what they think they can make, right?
Right. Well, there's a strong interplay there, right? That marketing is very much at the table, where they'll bring in, we've done research. This is what we see sells. This is what's hot. This is what's going on. You guys in the development side need to be well informed by that, and then you'll usually have executives who will say, yeah, we want to sell a lot of units of this. You guys do what marketing says. As much as possible, they'll feed into what the marketing day says. But it's an important and necessary role. If we didn't have that,
We talked about what happens
yeah.
when marketing doesn't effectively sell the product, but you see
Yeah.
these talks. A guy went through, I think it was Clive Barker's Undying. He walked through the various iterations of the female monster and how it just kept coming about make her sexier, she's too scary, make her sexier. And Lara Croft kind of did the same thing. She started in one place and ended up in some place very different. And there
Right.
were reasons for that. I would prefer we have a dialogue where we understand those reasons and try to figure out how we could possibly create characters that defy that. Because we do. I mean, Samus Aran, right?
Right.
Played with expectations. Shale in Dragon Age plays with expectations. Like, Shale is a she. And I think there's been enough time that game's been out, we can talk about that without it being a spoiler. But they Samus this character, and then the Asari, who don't actually have a gender. There are ways that fans will embrace. It's just, it's not necessarily a direct line.